Welcome to the Power Lunch. This is Rhett Power, your host. We do this program every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday around 12 noon. Today, we're going to do it a little later because, I've got Joel and I've got Joel Solomon on the line today, and we had to work around schedules, but that's okay because this is an important conversation. And so, anyway, the point of the show is to talk to today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, CEOs, corporate leaders about their secrets to success and the habits that they have that can all help us get better at what we do. That's the whole point of the show. Now, we won't be interactive today because I think we're going to be jam-packed right up until the end of our time. But if you do have questions, please ask those questions on LinkedIn or on the other platforms. Because we want to get to them and we will answer those questions on those platforms, no doubt about that. Now, if you like the show, give it a like or share so that your network can benefit from these conversations as well. Now, we are simulcasting on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all with the help of Social Live, and I think that's pretty cool. Cool. Today I've got Joel Solomon, as I said. Joel Solomon is a founding partner of Renewal Funds. It's Canada's largest mission venture capital fund. He is a senior advisor for RSF Social Finance and co-producer of their Integrated Capital Institute. He's on the board of governors for the University of British Columbia. He's board chair of Hollyhock and founding member of the Social Venture Network. His book, The Clean Money Revolution, is a call to arms to move trillions of dollars from damage to protection. Joel, thank you so much, man, for joining me.
I really appreciate it. And I just want to add that I am happy to answer questions on social too, if they come up and carry on conversation.
Excellent. That's really important, I think, so we get to, I think the conversation is going to spark a lot of questions. So what is the clean money revolution? You talked a little bit about it in the book. I've seen other interviews. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, first, as the language was an attempt to say something that might get noticed in this ocean of information out there. And the just very concept of clean money should convey to people that the idea for me is that our name is actually on our money. We have responsibility for the choices about where we spend it, invest it, bank it, how we use it. And people and places all around the world are affected by our money. That is another inconvenient truth that we would rather not think about.
Right.
However, the damage and the cost to the well-being of the future that comes from unconscious use of money, from unbridled desire for infinite more money, before we even know why we want to have that money or what we're going to do with it. So I recommend that we all ask ourselves how much is enough, particularly if we're affluent and we're entrepreneurs and we're on the rise, that we ask ourselves why and what we're going to do with it and what's going to matter. Because money is a very precious top subject. It comes from extraction of people's labor and from the planet. So we should take that much more seriously as the perhaps spiritually infused and also just a limited resource ultimately that is dependent on the entire ecosystem that keeps us alive.
Do you think that venture capital and private equity and this whole kind of ecosystem that we operate in, do you think that that's becoming more socially conscious? Or do you think I know we're not there yet, but I mean, is it changing?
There's progress for sure. When I got into this, it was, for myself, it just had to do with growing up in the 60s and having a mother that questioned everything and going through Vietnam and questioning capitalism and assassinations and all the turbulence. And it became, somehow, I think I got lucky and believed that there was a connection to my moral being and to who I am as a person, how I were to address and deal with money. Now, to people that are struggling to survive and just put a roof over their kids' heads and feed their families, This message, I got a very different message there. But I'm talking about the privileged couple of billion of us who really seem to have minimal guidance about what and why. And I think just like everything else in life, we should have a moral framework, ethical framework, and ultimately a political framework about it. And we need to know that my waste product is going into other people's bodies, their health, their well-being. It's damaging nature, which we depend on to survive. I was born with less than 3 billion people on the planet. We're about to hit 8 billion. We are hurtling towards very complex, very challenging times. So the more that every single one of us thinks about that and does something about it, makes choices with investing. So yes, there is a movement that's been going on for several decades. I put a good bit of attention to that in the book, some of the organizations, players, things like that. But it started as get patted on the head and kind of dismissed and poo-pooed. And things like the organic food movement and environmental technologies and cleaner cars. And now it has become clear to most everyone that there's good money to be made. There's important contributions to society in the future that can be done. And so the so-called impact investment movement is now got a real foothold. The biggest financial firms in the world are getting into it. And the different gradations of how far you go, how you judge, is it a stock market screening? Is it an actual company that's about something directly that you believe in? There's a huge ecosystem happening. It's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs. Young people get it better than people my age. And there's a career possibility now that's become quite robust.
Do you think that consumers, I kind of am of the belief that consumers are really going to demand that change, aren't they? They're going to really,
it's happening.
Companies have a purpose outside of filling, making the board wealthy,
That's right. That was a very discounted idea, but it's now proven. So you see the biggest automobile manufacturers in the world moving to electric and gas saving, despite regulatory insanity by politicians and special interests. And you see people have traceability now. We have information and access to know more. Pretty much, if you want to find out what's in this pen, what's in this baby, you can find out more and more. And if you will make yourself actually look at that information, you got some real choices to make. And young people are definitely driving it, because young people are starting to feel really depressed and forlorn. They're questioning whether there is a stable future for them. And I have a very close friend. She's a climate activist, trying to fight to reduce fossil fuel emissions, et cetera. And she just told me the other day about her son, who's 18, 19, who's in serious existential crisis about what's the world like 50 years from now, and what's his responsibility, what's he supposed to do about it. And I see this across the landscape.
No, I wonder that. I've got a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I wonder all the time, what are we leaving them? And you feel like sometimes, particularly in this particular climate, you feel like beating your head up against the wall. You really do. And so I can't imagine as a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old where a 15-year-old's not thinking, my 13-year-old's not really thinking about that. Right.
Yeah.
But I remember when I was 20, I was definitely thinking about,
right,
because it's that pressure of what is my life going to be like starts sort of, coming to be reality.
I have I have a question I'm interested in to ask you about. So the 13-year-old, has she noticed Greta?
He does. He does. Yeah. And the 15-year-old, definitely. The 15-year-old's looking at it and thinking, that's somebody my age that's speaking on a world stage. you know.
And the facts are getting more and more obvious. Now, here's another important thing to shift gears on it after the doom and gloom is this has become a great place to make money. If you can invent the cleaner car, the cleaner building, the cleaner everything, the less waste, the more healthy, all of these things now are recognized. They are marketing features. They are buy decision drivers. And you have the capacity to really check out what's more real, what's not. And then once you get that knowledge, you're kind of tainted. You can't, it's hard to turn back.
That's right.
It's hard to turn back. If I'm causing damage every time I, whatever it is, that's a lot to live with. So I believe that there's some probably advances and some reform ready in the religious sector as well, to help give us some guidance. We've got some very, very depressed and discouraged young people that need to feel that there's hope and optimism.
I do. I agree. What is your criteria? So if there's some businesses out there now, one of the things I know that when I was a young entrepreneur and looking at how to get ready for investment, how to prepare for that. Yeah. What is your advice? What do I need to do to get ready for investment? Yeah. And then if I'm a socially conscious company, where do I even start looking?
Well, I'll say about the get ready. It's that is just old fashioned. You gotta know your business, your supply chain, the effect of it, the pricing.
Basics.
Basics.
Fundamentals. Right?
But entrepreneurism has kind of become a new world religion. It's like everybody wants to be an entrepreneur and that's going to save the world and things like that. And I believe that it can. However, we have to continually discipline ourselves to go deeper and deeper on the issues that underlie what it takes to ship a product across a continent and where does the waste go and et cetera, et cetera. So we are now tied to a global system with every single act, really, and we know it. So in my view, the rising stars are going to be the ones that are more conscious and are thinking about how to take care of the world, and that they're not going to be investing in products that are extremely damaging. We're going to go down the food chain, less damage, less damage, less damage, more good, more long-term contributory. And so there's a lot of money now organizing that wants that. So whether it's through publicly traded companies and the environmental, social, and governance, ESG screening that kind of rates companies on how bad of actors they are versus how good. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to venture capital, what's called the impact investment movement has gone far. 20 years ago, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I probably knew, most every conference, at least in North America, but really beyond conferences, what are the companies that are actually leading the way? And it was down to the handfuls, and it was kind of crude. I mean, Ben and Jerry's created fun and politics around what was basically a high cholesterol heart disease product, but they used it for some really good things. And so gradually every sector, oil industry, mining industry, all of them are trying to figure out how to reduce negative impacts, how to be a better citizen, both in remote communities they may be doing a mine in or drilling a well, but also for their consumers. And you're going to have a harder and harder time retaining employees if you're not doing something that's got some soul to it. So I'm clearly an advocate. I see it growing very constantly now that I can't keep up with the field anymore.
What are you excited about in the field?
Well, our investment business, so we have we call it mission venture capital, just to have a differentiation there, but it's part of the impact investment premise. And we've been at it for just over 10 years. We've done 3 funds. We did 35 million, of 63 million, and now we're around 150. We work in both Canada and the US, so the exchange rate's always messing with the final total. Right. But our premise has been organic food and soil. how do you improve soil, because we're going to need it for 10 billion people.
Right.
And then what do you do about climate, and how do you reduce negative impacts? So the food thing is more obvious to people. Climate extends, I kind of said this, but automobile, transportation, built environment, extractive industries, just about everything we're doing is now driven in a way that we are contributing with most of our acts to things that someday will be looked at as uncivilized and just ignorant.
Crazy, right.
So I think it's important to develop your own construct of what you think you want to think about on your deathbed. Mm-hmm. When you think about your contribution and what you did in life and what you left for your families, of course we want to leave financial security. Of course we want to get them a good education and those things. But we have a lot of different kinds of choices within each of those sectors. And I know on my deathbed, which is, I'm 65 now. I was also born with a genetic kidney disease. And so a lot of, you could die soon and you could live long and there's nothing you can do about it, did help me, because you start to think about things. A friend gave me her kidney 14 years ago, so that ended happily. And also I'm in Canada now, where I never heard about insurance or money.
Yep.
But in any case, on my deathbed,
not to make bad choices of eating or going to the doctor. Yeah.
I want to be on my deathbed and know that I tried, that I have more accomplishments in incremental, maybe some bigger ones, that I have done something that matters. And when my descendants I'm not a procreator, but I have a big family. I'm married into it. And in any case, but I want to feel that they know that I did what I could, that I cared and I did what I could, and that I had some consistency about it.
What do you look for in founders when you guys invest in a company? What are you looking for?
So it's a complex, multifaceted thing, and none of us are perfect. Mm-hmm. But the first thing for us, because everything we do is designed around actually making a positive contribution beyond money, along with money, we want to know that they actually care about something, that we know something about their lives and why they're driven to do this. If it's just because it's the hottest new item and they're going to jump to the next thing later, that's less interesting. You kind of these days have the luxury to expect any of us to be lifelong learners, particularly those of us that can start businesses and have access to all that stuff. Right. So you want a lifelong learner, and you don't just want technical skills, human being skills, your spiritual, your psychological, your emotional skills. You're a coach. I'm sure this is not, if you can't handle conflict, if you can't deal with critique, if you don't know what makes yourself tick first, you're going to be I guess you can be a tyrant and succeed. We unfortunately have many examples of successful tyrants. I can't deny that. Yeah. But they got to live with their karma and life, and I can't solve all that.
It comes back.
Yeah. But how can you not, once you know what's going on in the world, how can you not try to pay attention that you're doing less harm and more good?
Okay.
I want that entrepreneur.
Right.
That truly cares.
That makes sense. You want somebody that's got purpose driven.
Yeah.
And focused. And I mean, that makes sense.
And then there's a set of technical and practical skills that have to do with building things and hiring people and all that stuff that are important. And they're tougher and tougher all the time, because people have better access to information. The entrepreneurs are getting smarter and sharper, and competition, and more countries, more cultures are getting in the game. And so you gotta be on your feet. You gotta be quick on your.
I work with on clients, some of my clients who are looking and looking for funding, it's really hard to say for them to understand that the funding, where you get the funding, has got to be a match too. I mean, you can't just take the first money that comes along. You need to make sure that your partners in that are on the same page, and that there's a synergy of some kind, that because otherwise it's going to be a bad partnership typically.
You want to take the time to do due diligence on your investors.
Absolutely.
Be sure you talk to their references, talk to other people they've invested with, study them, and find out what kind of reputations and how they behave under pressure if you can. Because I'd say, let's say, to a large degree, business is equated to a war game. Yes. And it's just who's the strongest and how do you win and defeat everybody else and crush your opponents and all that kind of thing. And that model, it'll keep working in some sectors, but it's going to work less and less. Back to the points I said about you got to keep employees, you got to have a social license, you got to have constituency that believes in you, consumers, and it's getting more complex. So you need to be a modern, multi-dimensional person. And you should not don't take money that you don't really have a good feeling about.
Right. And if you listen to your gut, if you know how to listen to yourself, if it's right or not, I think.
I do too. And then sometimes you make a mistake and you got to pivot quickly.
Right.
You got to admit it when you do and see how you get yourself unwound from it, because we're all going to do that.
Yeah. And that's not going to change. I mean, we're always going to run up against challenges, and you got to have a partner that's willing to go with you and make that pivot and try that new angle, because the pressure's great enough as it is. So sorry about that.
We have investors a little too much on pedestals of all-knowing and omnipotent, and you got to do exactly what they say, and you don't want to treat anybody that way, really.
No. It's hard enough. How do you change the conversation? It seems to me, sort of in where we are and things. How do you change that conversation that you can make money and do good? It's just very frustrating that you just talked about it a little bit. You think that winner take all kind of mentality will prevail in some sectors, but how do we push that conversation and that dialogue along, that we really have to do better?
Yeah. Well, first we realize that we want to, and we develop our personal integrity around what we believe and where we have to take stands. The business schools now are loaded with socially responsible business clubs. The investor world is increasingly populated by, let's say, family offices, people with big wealth, even charitable foundations making investments. And they have motivations and goals that go beyond strictly the rate of return, the financial rate of return. And the more that we can be, the demands on us are growing all the time. It probably was simpler to be a human in terms of these choices some time ago, where it was just find some food for tonight and be sure you got a fire going or something. But now you have to think about a lot of different things. And I think a lot of it's common sense. You go back to, with one thread, how do you want to be treated? What's your golden rule, so to speak? How do you want to treat other people? And what is the supply chain, the source of the raw materials, the shipping costs, the waste product that's created, the human health damage that you might be creating with your product? And we have a responsibility now today to think about that. And we're not going to reach perfect. We're going to keep doing better. And someday we will have actually enlightened individuals will be heads of nations, states, provinces, and somehow we will work our way towards wisdom and long-term thinking as the gold. And right now it's the opposite of that, far too often.
Do you think that that's let me ask you this. I'll ask this one. Do you think that regulation, let's just say, we're rolling back clean water regulations and clean air regulations and all kinds of environmental regulations right now. Do you think that those regulations hinder business?
They hinder rape and plunder.
Okay.
They are there to protect the commons. Government's role is to set the rules about the commons, so to speak, the minerals, the forests, the resources, the rules by which you conduct business. So this idea that scrapping regulations is some kind of nirvana, it is for those who are in control of the levers of power. Like being given a massive tax cut for some theoretical to stimulate the economy, for where all the wealthiest people get a bunch of money and the poorest people pay the price. The common sense from that does not work well for me. You have to live with a world that is increasingly visible, that we're at 8 billion people now, going to hit 10 billion if we make it. And you've just, I mean, I'm obviously a moralist on this, but I've also made it into a good business, successful business practices.
That's what I want to know. I mean, it seems to me that that's, I think it's, to me, it just doesn't work because I think you can, I never once worried about government regulation in the toy business.
Just pay my taxes, pay my costs.
If I make a good product with a that didn't hurt anybody, that was safe, and I focused on that, and I made sure of that before, I never ran up against that issue.
Yeah.
And so I don't understand. I from a personal standpoint, I don't understand the going backwards when it just doesn't sync with me, and I don't know if business, does it really help business? I mean, I guess it does if you're in the coal business or something else, but where's the
wiping out regulations can help your bottom line, but we're in this together, and I want my grandchildren to have a decent planet to live on. So it's very short-sighted. And the idea that you trust those who make the most money to make all the decisions, what happened to our morals, ethics, and spiritual understandings of things? What's the evidence around us right now? Yes, there's a booming economy, so to speak, for those who have. Yes, some other people are getting jobs that may not have had as good a job before. But all of that can be solved with a different form of intelligent use of tax dollars, regulations, and government resources.
It's a short-term game. To me, it's short-term games and a huge, huge long-term cost, right?
That's right.
I mean, by polluting our waterways again, I mean, the rates of sickness and disease and I mean, it just, to me, I don't get it. I'm looking for some business rationale if it makes sense, but it just doesn't.
We are anachronisms in some way, maybe considered naive and innocent, but I'm happy to stand there. I'm okay. If that's what you need to think about me, that's okay. But I'm going to work for thinking about the largest number of people that I can, and be sure that there is a functional planet here for 7 generations from now, 15 generations from now. That seems like the responsibility of humans since the beginning of human beings.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So you've done well. The company has done well. You've picked good companies that you've supported. can you talk about some of the companies that you have some great examples in the book? What are some of your stars that you really are proud of?
There's a couple phases in my own investing career, and now that we're managing a lot of other people's money, that does put a bit more constraints on us. So some of the greatest investments I made were on pure instinct, small amounts early on, just seeing the spark and the style and the values of entrepreneurs. And so some really interesting things came out of that, but that's getting to be some years ago. I still do that. I like to sprinkle around small amounts of money with people that I really am inspired by, because they tend to do better, or they tend to do fine. That's a good way to say it. So in terms of our portfolio now, so the organic food thing was really exciting and still new and front edge as recently as a decade ago. That is becoming a very, what's the word for it? There's a lot of players now in that. Big Food, which is maybe it's the 6th largest food companies in the world, they're not good at innovating. They've got all the money and the tools and everything, but it's too bureaucratic and cumbersome. So they realized after a while that these crazy hippie entrepreneurs that were doing all kinds of products here. I've got my friends that have a yerba mate product, and they're going to save the rainforest, and they're going to help indigenous people, and they're going to reduce climate. You know, they're top to bottom Guayaki. But so there's now, though, we go, like in a couple of weeks, we go down to something called the Natural and Organic Food Expo in Anaheim. And that thing has gone from 50 attendees to probably 100,000 this year. And you can walk through there and you see the most amazing products, all kinds of, but there must be 250 different power bars that you could invest in, power bar companies. And so it starts to get littered. And back to Big Food, what they're now doing is in many ways not even bothering with the innovation. They just wait and watch a company get some traction, get a product, and buy it. So that's a good ecosystem for the entrepreneur that wants to build and flip, or maybe stay with the company and keep helping grow it, or take their next innovation and go do it. But I feel that in food, it is somewhat finite. So we came up with the Impossible Burger and other sell laboratory meats and things like that. Okay, that's a big new boom area for the moment. But there's only so much innovation you truly can do in food. You can agricultural practices, technologies, water protection, things like that, sure. So those are interesting. But the technology side, it's hard to fight it. Environmental technology, which we call our area, I may have said this earlier, but I really like to think of it as climate technologies, and getting everything less wasteful, less damaging, more helpful, more long-term, all of that kind of thing. Those are some pretty exciting ones. So we've been in water analytics to help make much easier data collection and analyzing of water systems all over the world. We're in a company that makes a fiberglass window wrapper as opposed to vinyl and aluminum. Vinyl and aluminum both leak heat. So you get a LEED Gold building, but it's made with vinyl or aluminum window frames, door frames, and you're blowing heat out the window. So fiberglass is going to be one of the coming, regulations are going to back it in forward cities and things like that. And so these are some engineers that just got really frustrated with the heat loss coming out of high rises. And they've finally come up with a window wall, as they call it, that is completely sealed and will reduce heat loss dramatically. So that's an example. We've been involved with traffic emissions control, where you're synchronizing the traffic lights and you've got information collection and you know where there's an accident. You really start to be a smart city, and you can then redirect traffic, and you save a lot of emissions from people not just sitting, just idling. And I mean, these sound kind of not that exciting in some ways, but they are when you see when the results come in and you feel like you're making a contribution. We're in a technology that helps big utilities adapt to distributed renewables.
Okay.
So in other words, you got solar and you got wind, but they're not big concentrated mega plants.
Right.
And so when those go into the grid, it can throw off the system. So now they need more sophisticated technology. We're about to invest in one that is an advanced method of finding leaks in water pipes. There's an unbelievable sickening amount of water that is lost through undetected leaks.
I imagine.
Clean water back into. So you kind of go through the built environment and, as I said before, energy, transportation, all these different sectors. And there are many ways to improve the efficiency, do less waste, use materials that are less harmful, et cetera. So maybe it's boring, but we get excited about it.
Well, you know, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be that sexy for it to make a big impact.
That's right.
Well, this has been really fascinating, and I do appreciate your time, and I think it's exciting where, with all the doom and gloom, I do have a lot of hope that we are making progress, and that companies and entrepreneurs actually can make a huge social impact and a huge impact on with their products and their services. And I think that that part is actually very exciting to me, because I think we can drive change, and we can force, like you said, even the big companies are starting to get that if we cut down on emissions, their customers are going to demand that they do. They're going to demand that they do. So we might as well go ahead and do it, right?
That's right.
There's a business case for it. So I think that's
right.
I think that is encouraging, and I do applaud you for sort of being a pioneer in this, and you know, starting this, being you know on the forefront of this movement, and being out there. So keep talking. Keep. The book is a great book. It's called The Clean Money Revolution. So go pick a copy of it up. We'll put a link to it in the show, so that people can go out and get a copy, because I think if you haven't read it, it's a great read, and I think it'll open some eyes to you know where we should be.
And if you really like it and want to share it, I got digital downloads and things like that I can share with you, and you can find me in the major social media under my name, Joel Solomon.
There you go.
So yeah, I'm fairly accessible.
If you have a company in those sectors, most certainly reach out.
And then I'll add renewalfunds.com, which gives you some criteria to look at about, you know, where our parameters are and things like that, how to deal with this.
Fantastic. Joel, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for spending some time with us today. Lunchtime, sort of on the West Coast, tea time or so on the East Coast. And you guys have a good day. We'll be back tomorrow. I've got a great show tomorrow afternoon at noon on Power Lunch Live.